We are so delighted to have her here. Sunita, she is very passionate about using technology to solve large developmental and growth issues, and we learn more from her today as to how does she approach these things. She is the head of Digital LifeCare, a social impact initiative at Dell Technologies, which is essentially focused on digital transformation of primary healthcare systems across India. She has also led Ayushman Bharat, the non-communicable diseases related healthcare technology system, and she will share more with us today. She also led the partnership with Andhra Pradesh and Telangana governments to deploy the technology solutions. She's the founder CEO of Argyam. So before water, I guess she was, before health, she was deeply embedded into the idea of water, and is now going to take up the responsibility as chairperson starting October 21. So I have had the privilege of knowing her for a long time now, and have learned a lot with what she has been driving in the healthcare space. And we are delighted to have her here today. So welcome once more, Sunita. And what we have in the audience today is the cohort of Ashoka Aspire Fellows, as well as some of the other mission leaders and their team members from across the societal platform ecosystem that you're also very much a part of. So, with that, I thought it'll be good to get started. And to begin, it would be lovely to hear from you, Sunita, on I think as I learn more and more about what you're driving in healthcare, of course, tell us a bit about digital life care, because that term itself sounds very exciting. And probably that'd be a good place to start. Tell us a bit more about digital life care, because life care is giving us a sense of continuum, of a continuity. So how did you get to that? What was the way by which you reached that place? Give us a little bit about where it began and how did you get to this place.
Thank you, Sanjay, and thanks again for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here because I've been following, of course, societal platforms since it started, and I find the whole idea and the articulation extremely compelling. And I've kind of so many times felt like, when I read that, oh, this is exactly, they're talking about what we are doing, right? And so you guys have really captured the essence of this journey that so many of us are going through in so many sectors, and really abstracted it out well, so that it's kind of common to all sectors. So first of all, hats off to all of you, and welcome to all the Ashoka Changemakers, the Aspire Fellows. You guys have been at this for a year now, I think, and I saw the profiles. Impressive, such an impressive group of people. So it's double pleasure to be here. So let me start off by talking a little bit about digital life care. I'm assuming you can all hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this, as Sanjay said, it's a social impact initiative of Dell. In fact, Dell has this ambitious thing called Progress Made Real, which is our CSR initiative, a 10-year vision for our CSR activities with a bunch of moonshot goals. And one of those moonshot goals, it's basically, these are in the areas of sustainability, diversity, inclusion, transforming lives, and then ethics and transparency. So in the transforming lives section, which is where our work fits in, we have a goal of providing enduring value to 1 billion lives by 2030. And obviously that's a uber humongous, big, hairy, audacious goal. And but that's the only way things work, right? You kind of push yourself. So we are a part of that. So basically, Dell is taking social impact very, very seriously. And how we started digital life care, is started as an idea in 2013. Frankly, it was coming out of my background, living in the US for a long time as a technology person, then coming back to India and working in the development sector with Rohini, with many of the Argyam team who are right here on this call, and working with Janagraha before that. So really seeing both, and then Aadhaar happened, and that just kind of took the whole country by storm. And so that idea got seeded in so many of us, right? Like, how do you use technology to solve these really entrenched problems? Um, and how do you, the same kind of, amplification, the same kind of transformation that you're seeing in the rest of the country, in the for-profit sector, in other sectors, how do you see this how do you see that happen in the social sectors? How do you leverage technology? So that's how the idea started. Joined what was Legacy EMC then, to create this as like a small R&D initiative. So co-created this with a very reputed NGO partner, an NGO leader called Dr. Sudarshan of Karuna Trust. Many of you might be familiar with him. He's done remarkable work with the tribal communities across the country. 40 years, 40 plus years, right? So we kind of, started looking, well, the first part of the journey was just going and talking to a whole bunch of people in the health space, right? From, NGOs, policy institutions, just anybody doing anything, right? Academics and action research, innovation, a lot of tech companies coming up with a lot of innovations, to talk to everybody, and then gradually move to the idea that the focus needs to be on primary healthcare, right? And then we kind of, let me just talk briefly about the journey, and then we'll go into continuum of care. So we started working in primary healthcare with Dr. Sudarshan. That was in 2014, and then went on to work with Andhra and Telangana, first at a district level, then at a state level. Literally every year we went up, first year worked with one primary health center, next year with one district, the year after that with one state, the year after that with the next state. And then 2017, we started working with Government of India. And so basically what we are doing is that we've created this technology platform to transform primary healthcare services. And from 2013 to 17, we started working with these state governments to develop, the solution and, build it to help them deliver primary healthcare services specifically for non-communicable diseases. And so in 2017, when Government of India was planning to do this, to roll it out across the country as a part of Ayushman Bharat, we had the opportunity to go pitch our work, and then we were chosen as the technology partner. And since then, it's been a blur. Since 2018, it's been working with Government of India as the technology partner, along with Tata Trust. We've been working with Tata Trust. They've been the implementation partner. We've been the technology partner. And we've done this for the last, now it's getting, about 3-4 years now. And the program, the technology system is being used in about 26 states and union territories. We have about 100 million people enrolled in the system. About like 80,000+ people, health workers, doctors, administrators have been trained. It's a massive government program. The technology is just one small part of it, right? Which is something worth repeating multiple times, right? The technology is just an enabler. But from our perspective, learning how to design, develop, deploy a technology at this scale has been a massive experience. So this is the Ayushman Bharat. I'll tell you a little bit about the program. It's the Ayushman Bharat Non-communicable Diseases Screening, Treatment, and Management Program. And so under this program, everybody over the age of 30 is screened for hypertension, diabetes, oral, breast, and cervical cancers. So why is it that important, right? So India, like many other countries, is going through what is called an epidemiological transition. So, what used to be the huge disease burden 20, 30 years ago, maternal child health, communicable diseases, has now shifted significantly to non-communicable diseases. So 60% of the deaths today are because of non-communicable diseases. We have a huge 4.58 trillion loss estimated to our economy by 2030 because of NCDs. And why is technology important? Yes, NCDs are important, so the countries decided to focus on that. But why is technology important? There are 3 things that characterize NCDs, right? One is they're silent. Unlike, any of our communicable diseases, including COVID, any of these other conditions, you don't know you have it until it gets really, really advanced, right? Like I think less than, about 50% of breast cancer cases, 80% of cervical cancer cases are diagnosed in advanced stages. And once it's diagnosed in such an advanced stage, your 5-year, 5-year, sorry, not, mortality rate is very, very high, right? Your 5-year survival rate is extremely low. Second thing is they're chronic. So you don't just take a pill, you don't get a, one shot and then you're, one polio drop and then you're done, right? These things have to be managed for life, month after month, year after year. You have to keep taking your medication. You have to keep, following your lifestyle changes. And that's kind of harder to do at a population scale where awareness, health-seeking behavior is low. The third thing is, and this is not very intuitive, they disproportionately impact the poor, right? For a whole bunch of reasons, including the organ system development when you have low birth weight, when you're born with low birth weight. So for all of these reasons, it's very hard to ensure that people come into the system that are caught early and then they are tracked for life to ensure that they're being monitored and taken care of, right? And so that's why technology plays a really big role. So this whole thing is what we call continuum of care, right? Ensuring that you catch people at the start when they're completely normal. So that's why the government says population-based screening. Every individual over the age of 30, screen them for hypertension, diabetes, cancers, right? When they're completely fine, you start the screening early, then follow them through this continuum of care, through screening, referral, treatment, diagnosis, treatment, and management for life, right? And what happens is that people fall off through these at various points. People might get screened, but not really get referred. They get referred, they may not actually show up at the next level. They take one dose of treatment, they may not follow up for the rest, for a whole bunch of reasons, which all of you are very familiar with, right? Societal, social determinants of this. And so technology to enable continuum of care is what we're trying to do through digital life care. Sanjay, please tell me when, I know now you have a plan, it's 10 minutes and 10 minutes. So let me know if I'm going over.
No, this is beautiful because from the larger idea of you wanting to work in healthcare to bringing it down to what in societal platform thinking we say the core interaction, which is bringing it down to the core of continuum of care and how do you use diagnosis and screening to establish that continuum. Often that you find that a CSR organization takes up something of this nature because classical CSR projects are local community. If we can do something, partner with a few local organizations, or at best do some capacity building initiatives and those kind of things. Of course, there are many models which different CSRs follow. So I think we would love to learn from you. How did you get to sort of bring this around, seated inside a corporate environment? I'm sure you have had your storms and your battles, and you have your battle scars of what it takes to bring something like this up inside a corporate environment. And what are the key learnings from that?
Yes, thanks. So it's, after I left Argim in 2012, I took a break for some time, wanted to spend time with the kids and just kind of, re-energize myself. And so then I started, like I said, I was very interested in seeing how technology could be used to solve large-scale social problems. So started talking to a bunch of people. And at that time, legacy EMC and Dell merged in 2016. So by that time, it was legacy EMC, which is again a large, a tech company doing storage and large-scale systems. So I was talking to the Bangalore leadership, and as the person who headed that at the Bangalore Center, as Sarf, and I was telling him that this is what I'm really interested in. I've been working in this space. I'm very clear I want to remain in the social impact space, but I'm kind of keen to see how technology could be used very strategically, very deeply, because at Arkim too, we had tried out a bunch of technology. I knew that there was a lot of technology being tried out by NGOs, but to do it really deep, you needed to have a tech environment, right? You need that ecosystem, you need the critical mass of tech, people, right? And that could happen inside a tech company. So I was saying, this is what I'm interested in. He said, well, they were also very inspired after Aadhaar and saying, we've been wanting to do something like that too, to see how we could get into building end-to-end solutions, not just creating a product and putting it out there, but really building a solution to solve problems, right? So I said, well, do you guys have the appetite to work with government? It's going to take a long time. You don't see results immediately. And he said, absolutely. So that's how it started, just a conversation. It started, I came on board late 2013. There was nothing. It was just an idea, right? And so one thing they were clear is, look, you know how companies are, right? We have very, very focused on the bottom line. And so there were no major budgets. So it was me and there was one other person who was a PhD in computer science and who never, hadn't been coding in like years, right? So, and I hadn't been done any coding I couldn't code to save my life. So it was the two of us with all these, passion and ideas and all that stuff, but nothing, no budget, no team, right? So then I started talking to a lot of people, went and spoke to, I think, 40 different organizations and, individuals from across the spectrum. And one of them was, of course, Dr. Sudarshan, just trying to understand the health sector. And it became pretty clear that primary health sector was the important area. That's where you needed to focus if you wanted to get to universal healthcare. Thailand, there's a bunch of other countries that shown it, that you need to strengthen the primary healthcare system. And I think there were studies that show that 52% of the healthcare conditions could be addressed at the primary health level, right? So very appealing to strengthen that. So we started looking at how can technology be used to do that, right? Because, also technology can work at scale. So we were looking at large scale problems. So talking to all of these people, it seems like there was a lot we could do, but how do you do it? Like I said, neither of us could actually code. We're sitting in this company with enormous amount of technology, talent, and a lot of people, but everybody doing their own work, and I had nothing, right? So we started going and pitching it to a bunch of business units within Dell, right? To Dell Bangalore, telling everybody, here's this, this is the status of healthcare, especially in rural India. This is what people go through. These are the challenges they face. This is how you live your life. Those are the challenges they have to deal with on a daily basis. We want to see how we can use technology to help them, right? And so many people, their response was amazing, right? So many people, especially all the youngsters, right? And then so they came up saying, yeah, we want to be a part of this. So spoke to all the leaders and said, can we carve out time for these people to help support this? They said, yeah, but the day job can't suffer. So let it be passion time. So this whole passion time thing is what the first 6 months, I worked with about 40 volunteers across multiple divisions of Dell Bangalore. Actually, no, I even had some people from Dell China and a couple of people from Dell Hyderabad. So from across, and this whole team. So I had, UX, I had program managers, product managers, I had Android developers, backend developers, database engineers, deployment team, UX, UI, QA, everybody, right? Everybody giving a little bit of the time. So we had a full-fledged team of 40 people, except they were not full-time. Everybody was giving, the youngsters would be like, they finish up their work at 6 in the evening and they'd be like, no problem, we can work till 11 or 12, right? Many people would work over the weekends. And so we would have, so this team actually was like fabulous. We had such a great experience because for a lot of them, many of them grew up in big cities. They'd never been to a village before. And so one of the things I managed to wrangle out of the Dell management was just give me a small budget, at least to organize the cabs to take people to the field, to Gumballi, which is where we were working with Dr. Sudarshan, about 3 hours away. So, and to do small lunches for the team, once in 2 weeks or whatever, so that we can keep them all energized, right? Order some thalis and all sit together in a conference room and share stories. And then take them to the field. And so for many of these people, that was just amazing, going out and actually interacting with health workers. And Dr. Sudarshan is very, very particular. And I was very particular. I'm like, you're not going to build apps if you're sitting here in Bangalore. You have to understand the users. So we spent a lot of time on the field, and like I was telling you, Sanjay, this actually worked out well. I think it worked out much better than having my full-fledged dedicated IT team to build it out, because this was a self-selecting group. The people who joined were passionate. I would actually go and speak to a business unit with, like, let's say 300 people, right? And go pitch this whole thing. So, everybody would say, thanks, great, lovely, so idea sounds good and all that. But 10 people would actually approach me at the end of the talk and say, I come from this village. My father was a PhD medical officer. My uncle did this happened, that happened. And so I'm really keen on knowing more. So out of those 10, I'd say, okay, come join us for the first 2 set of meetings. Some would drop out. So we had to do a lot of these things to eventually get to these 40 people, right, who stuck on. So I think that worked really well, because you found the people who were really passionate and who kind of, went through this whole thing, because it's not easy. It might sound easy, like we came out with the first version, but, product teams are used to developing software in a very, very structured way. In a big company like Dell, you want your user stories, you want your requirements document. I'm not going to get any of that from the health workers or from Karuna Trust. So it was a lot of iteration going back and forth. Let's think about this idea, brainstorm, draw it out, take that to the field. They say, no, 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 then build out some version. They say, no, come back, do it. So it requires a lot of patience. And because of these volunteers having a lot of enthusiasm, that's how it kind of worked out. And so I think that celebrating small successes, doing these group lunches every 2 weeks, where we all sat around in a big conference room, everybody went around the table, talked about what they were doing, what they learned, what were their challenges. I think all of that really, really helped. Having a core team at the center to pull in all these volunteers and to hold them was very important, because of course they have deadlines. They'll do it for a month and then something happens, they're suddenly pulled off. Somebody else needs to pick up that slack. So having redundancy, having a core team to pull it all together, I think that was very important. And I think also that as we grew along, making sure it aligned with Dell's CSR, once we merged with Dell, making sure that it aligned with Dell's idea of social impact and CSR, and making sure that while there's no revenue coming out of this, it was a pure, initially we thought that maybe we could do it as a R&D thing eventually that could generate some revenue. But after a year or two, it just seemed like that was going to be very, very hard for the kind of work that we were doing. And then Dell CSR said, we'll support it. But making sure that we aligned with the overall, goals of the company in terms of CSR and in terms of using an ecosystem approach, open sourcing this, using, ensuring that we were, there was inclusion. So all of this stuff, I think those were the two things that we learned out of this process. Start small, start with volunteers, and by the way, the first solution went live in Gumballi with Dr. Sudarshan at Karuna Trust in about like 8 months, completely with volunteers, right? And then when we had enough proof points, went back to the management and said, okay, now can we get 2 or 3 people? So then I got a couple of contractors. And then, after we did the first district, we said, now can we get a few more people? So it happened year after year, incrementally, with a few people here, slowly building up. So until we came to Government of India, I didn't have the full team. It's only after we started that we got the full team.
Yeah, it's a fascinating run from 2 people to serving 100 million in a span of few years. But before we get to that side of the story, which we'll do in the next segment, I think this was very interesting that you starting getting volunteers together, hacking it at the end of office hours, hacking it with the community, building something, taking it out with people who are just doing it on passion time. I love that term, passion time, and going live with the first instance with just volunteer time, right? This is a very interesting, and in between all of this, surviving a corporate merger or of sorts, right? The EMC Dell, where this could have been simply washed away, saying, I don't know what this project is and why should you even be doing this?
Oh, that happened many times. That happened many, many times.
What would need to be retained by you? What do you do and what does the government do? How do you decide? Yeah. I think it's a good segue. The third part, we'd love to hear from you as to then, once you had built this out, tested, tried, and then you started this process of scaling up. What all happened? How did you go about it? And in the process, you could also talk about what did you decide to do yourself? What did you decide to get done? And then
Yeah.
come back for more questions.
Yeah. So when we started talking, with Government of India, this, first of all, there's a lot of experience, especially in central government, right? A lot of the bureaucrats there are extremely seasoned, and many of them have been a part of these initiatives. They're very aware of these things that come from working in states where they've tried out these things. So um, a lot of this kind of thinking was also led by them in terms of roles and who does what and carving out the spaces and all that stuff. It wasn't like we said, of course, we came on board with Tata Trust saying we will support this pro bono. And one of the conditions they had was we don't want vendor lock-in, it has to be open source. And so we said, yes, we already got approval. But now actually operationalizing that is taking time, right? So the philosophy and the thinking has always been open source from the beginning on all sides. But in the process of operationalizing that. In terms of the roles in the institutional structures, like I said, it was led, driven, kind of the conversation was led by them, but we kept looking around, evolving, learning, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. We are the technology partner. We design and develop the software in conjunction with expert partners that the ministry brought in. Right. So in a way, it's kind of broadly co-creation with ministry, because what we developed for Andhra and Telangana, by the time we came to the center, they said, no, it's got to work for the whole country. So we have national guidelines. So we'll have to. So we ended up redoing a lot. And this is another thing, right? That when you don't build at once, you don't start off with Dr. Sudarshan and say, I'm going to build something for, 500 million people. You build something for Gumbali, and then you learn from that. You agile, you iterate. You say, when you go to a district, so for a district, you need to think about this, which you didn't have to think there. And so you keep some, you throw some, and that happens for the state. When we came to the center, one of the first meetings that we had, there were like 40 experts who came, who were there from AIMS and WHO and all the institutions, ICMR institutions and international institutions too, because they were all expert partners. And so it was quite overwhelming actually. So all of them were giving inputs about, all of this stuff. And we were kind of trying to quickly learn how to work with government, national government, how to understand, and NCDs itself, because they're not health experts, right? And so when you have AIMS, head of departments talking about, what you need to the guidelines for diabetes or whatever. So a lot of learning and ramping up with them. So setting up the expert committees so that they could vet all these guidelines, and working with NHSRC, the government's, technical, health technical arm. All of that was set up by ministry. Thanks, Sanjay. And then so that was on the design of the solution. The deployment, it was very clear that it had to be in a government data center. So it was in the BSNL data center. There's an institution called CHI, Center for Health Informatics. So working with them on that part of it. Again, our role, from the beginning, it was clear we were not going to handle the data. It was a government program. It was not going to sit in a Dell data center or whatever, right? A technical support unit was required to actually maintain and run this. We had done a lot of that stuff in Andhra and Telangana. We knew that a whole team was needed. And so between Tata Trust and us, and sitting inside, we housed that team inside the government. So we created that institutional structure. So all of these things were set up, right? Apart from what already existed in ministry, the DGHS and the expert committees, then the technical support units. Then Tata Trust set up an L1 group that was going to do the call center, to handle all the support calls. The L2 group that would deal with the slightly more complex stuff. And then the Dell team did the enhancements and the technology related stuff in Bangalore. There was a cascade training model that was set up. Tata Trust had that experience, but we also, all of these were done very closely discussing with government what works, going back and forth, iterating. When we actually develop a new module, now that it's already rolled out, in the beginning, we didn't work that closely with states because frankly, it took all of our time and effort and bandwidth just working with the ministry to get the first version rolled out. We started in November of 2017, and they said the Prime Minister is going to launch Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers in 2018 April. So can we have the first version live? And there was significant rework, so it was massive effort to try and get that out. And then we spent a lot of time to kind of redo that thing, all of 2018. Once it got out to states and states started adopting, now we get a lot of feedback from states, right? So now we're getting it from the users. So initially it came in from the people who are framing these policies and the frameworks and the guidelines. And then now more and more we get it from the users. And it's not easy because it's a central system and states have their own different, health is a state subject, it's a federated thing. So they want their own custom stuff. I have a different model in my state and I do things differently in my state. So balancing that is always a challenge, right? And so that goes into how do you design something for scale, right? You have to make sure it's scalable. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We're getting close to the top of the hour, but scalability, availability, configurability, performance, security, these are all things, sound like buzzwords, but every one of them, there's like months and months of pain and thought and effort that goes in, and we keep struggling with this even now, right? What works now is not going to work a year from now when we are trying to support 200 million people. So it's a continual effort, right? And so in terms of configurability, how do you at least make it easy so that some of the things at least can be, configured at a state level? It would be beautiful to have a completely beautifully designed system that could, completely configurable, but it's not feasible, because we are a small CSR team trying to develop it and deploy it and deal with states and, this thing. So it's quite challenging. But having said that, it's been a heck of a ride, this whole experience.
Yeah. I think you've been very humble, Sunita, because coming from a not-for-profit background, entering into corporate, taking it up with CSR, putting together a bunch of volunteers, building something, working with the government, throwing it away, building it again, throwing it away, building it again, throwing it away, and getting here. I think there are a lot of interesting things that I'm taking away personally from this conversation. It is such an entrepreneurial venture. We have been looking at different shades and colors and types of platforms that all the different leaders who are coming on this chats. And I think today we got one more complexion, one more shade of what it takes to build something like this. And so we're very grateful for that. If there was one word of advice, or maybe even more than one, I leave that to you, that you would like to give to people who are in early days, going back to where you began, what is it that you would share with entrepreneurs, which would give them that seed of how do you go about doing something like this? Hindsight is 2020. So when you look behind, what do you see?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to talk it limit to the use of technology for social impact, obviously, because I really can't. There are others much more qualified than me on the other aspect. But in terms of building technology for solving societal problems, I think that initially don't compromise on the quality of what you're building in terms of solving the problem, right? It's very easy to build technology apps that kind of do something that you want to address, right? Because it's easy to build apps and it's easy to just do something that's at a very high level, it kind of solves it. But I think that the initial part of going really, really deep into understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and making sure that your technology is built and used and with the actual users for that local context, I think is probably the most important thing. Because even within primary health, if it's in the private sector, if it is, it's completely different, right? If it's in urban areas, so you I wouldn't, and that's something I would stress a lot. Listen to the users, work very, very closely to make sure you're actually solving that problem, and then be prepared for everything else that I just talked about. Just be completely prepared for all of these things, to be turned away over and over. Before we went to Government of India, I would have talked to, I don't know how many states, how many times, right? And even to ministry, went there multiple years over and over again before it finally happened. So be prepared for that. It takes a long time. Dell, by the way, didn't have any credibility as a health tech, as a company that does healthcare solutions, right? So we didn't really have any, track record or anything like that. People know us for Dell laptops or Dell systems, right? So that had to be an individual going on, not an individual, a team, people just going there. And so be prepared for that. It takes a long time, but also be prepared for working with some really, really amazing people. That I found in government and in the ecosystem, extremely knowledgeable, extremely well-intentioned people who are dealing with problems at such scale and such complexity that they get what you're talking about very, very quickly, right? So I think that's been eye-opening for me, working in Delhi, just meeting like really amazing people inside government and in the partners. So I think that yeah, those are my few takeaways.
That's a fascinatingly timed closure, if you will. I think thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for sharing. And we will keep the learning journey on. I'm sure there'll be another day we'll come back together to learn more from you.